Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Identity Navigator. Today, we'll talk about role based access control or RBAC. Now, if IAM was to be distilled in just one concept, it would be RBAC. It is because everybody knows about RBAC, but very few understands it. Also, in majority of the cases, RBAC programs are messy, sometimes fail, and may not achieve 100% success without significant executive buy-in and long-term commitment. Throughout my career, fortunately or unfortunately, I have got the chance to implement multiple role-based access control programs. I did learn this craft from my friend Ullas Tharakan. So Ullas, shout out to you. He was my colleague at a previous company and is currently a managing director at Deloitte, doing extremely well for himself. So if you're in the market for implementing RBAC program, Ullas is your guy. And just to let you know, I was not paid to say this. So before we deep dive into role-based access control, just some personal updates. Last week was quiet. As some of you know, I'm traveling to meet extended family tomorrow, so did some shopping. Also reread another book, or one of the books that I really like, which is 13 Things That Mentally Strong People Do. So looked at my cliff notes for that, and went out of my comfort zone actually, and met a LinkedIn contact on Thursday in a coffee shop. So I met Samir via LinkedIn a few days back, and he was in town. So he asked me if we want to meet for coffee, and I said, yeah, absolutely, why not? Which is very unlike me, but I finally did that and did go and meet him. So that was good. So, yes, another thing, my AirPods went bust. They now have a crackling sound, and also there is no more noise cancellation. Did go to Apple Genius Bar, and they said that since this is out of warranty, they cannot do anything for it. So I guess I will have to buy another one. So Black Friday list has already been started. But enough of that. Let's deep dive into role-based access control. So if you are here, I already know that you can define IAM. But let's redefine IAM for a second. So it is a framework used to ensure that the right individuals have the right access to the right resources. And that is where RBAC is such a core concept. Right access to the right resources. So instead of assigning permission directly to users, RBAC assigns them to roles, which users then inherit. So think of permissions, or you can call them entitlements, whatever they are. So they are an entity that gives you access to carry out a particular operation. And then roles are a collection of these individual permissions or entitlements. And then these roles are assigned to individuals. So if you're thinking about RBAC, think about roles as these are groupings of permissions that defines what action can be performed on which resources. For example, an admin role might have full access, while a reader might only have view access. And it will really depend upon what are the permissions that are bundled within that role. There are two security principles that you should always keep in mind while thinking about RBAC, which is like least privilege. So give only the access that is needed, and separation of duties. Split responsibilities so no single individual has too much power. Now, what are the benefits of role-based access control? Simplicity and scalability. Obviously, instead of managing individual user permissions, you are managing roles. So the amount of active objects that you are managing decreases. So the total number of objects increases, obviously, because now you have permissions, plus you have another abstract thing called as roles. But now you are managing roles more than you are managing individual permissions, right? So that is why it is simple and also scalable. Audibility or auditability. My apologies. So it is easier to audit user access and ensure compliance. Even during the certification process, nobody wants to certify 3,000 individual entitlements. But if we are using role-based access control and the model is good, probably we'll have less things to certify, or the managers would have less things to certify. And then finally, flexibility. So as needs changes, you can easily modify roles without affecting every user, right? So let's say 6,000 users in your organization have got role A, and now everybody needs to be assigned another entitlement X. So instead of going and provisioning that entitlement X to every user, you can just add that to role A, and that is the flexibility that you get. And also it's the same for how you remove access for all the users at the same time. So I hope that gives you some sense of why role-based access control is there. Now, on the same breath, we have always used policy-based access control and attribute-based access control, or something new that I'm working on, which is relationship-based access control. So hopefully we'll get a chance very soon to talk about that. But role-based access control is very coarse-grained in nature, and attribute or policy-based become very fine-grained in nature, right? And we will talk about them in some of the future podcasts, hopefully. But today, the focus is on these running a very successful RBAC program. What are the gotchas, what you should think about, what are the tools out there in the market, and essentially this is providing coarse-grained access to the users. So how do you plan for an RBAC project? So there are few phases, right? So let's get through each of those phases one by one. So the preliminary phase, or let's call it the assessment phase, in which you talk to the stakeholders, identify the stakeholders, carry out interviews, talk to those department heads or IT managers or end users to understand existing access mechanism, challenges, and needs. You also document existing system. You map out current access controls, systems, application that will fall under RBAC. Do you want to do it for all the systems in your organization? Do you only want to carry it out for your Active Directory or Azure Active Directory? Do you only want to carry it out for high target assets, or whatever you want to do? You have to define the scope and then document those systems which are in a scope. And then you identify goals. And I'll talk to you more about the individual KPIs that should be defined, but you have to clearly articulate what you aim to achieve with RBAC. So it could be enhanced security, it could be compliance, it could be process simplification, it could be all of them, but you clearly have to articulate what it is. So once this assessment phase is carried out and the project hopefully gets kicked off, then you get into the role and role model design phase. So in this phase, what you are defining is what are the type of roles that you want to have in your organization. What is the role model? What is the relationship between those roles? And some of the other things like, would you allow nested roles? Would you allow one entitlement in a role or one permission in a role, or a role can only be defined if it has more than one permission in it? So these are the things that you define in role and role model design phase. Again, it could very well depend on the company that you are working for, and also some of these definitions are used interchangeably. So some might define business rules one way, other might define it another way, but at a basic level, these are the different role types that I've seen. So one of them is business rules. So these roles are basically defined based on job functions, responsibilities, your job profile, or your business processes. So they represent real world positions. So think of the business roles as the tasks within the organization. So marketing manager, HR specialist, sales executive. So these are the roles which would resonate most with the business. They help in translating business requirements into access control mechanisms. Then we come to IT roles, which are roles specific to IT functions. They are obviously centered around systems, applications, infrastructure management, say for example, database administrator or network engineer or application developer. So these are useful to organizations to manage access to IT specific resources and to segregate duties within the IT department. Another thing or another type of roles is birthright roles. So as the name suggests, these roles are automatically assigned to users based on certain attributes or conditions, often at the time of joining the organizations. So what does that mean? So these roles are typically defined based upon the user type. So if user type is equal to employee, they might want access to Active Directory, they might want access to Exchange and things like this. So those permissions are bundled within an employee role and then provisioned to them. Or it could be based upon user type is equal to contractors. So you might not want to provision Visio licenses to your contractors, but to your employees. And that is why, you'll not provision Visio permission to your contractors. Now, in some companies, I've seen birthright and business roles changed or defined interchangeably in terms of, they also say, or you might also come across the line of thinking that based upon your job profile, any role that is defined that helps you carry out your job are birthright roles. So as we discussed in terms of business roles, marketing manager or HR specialist, which are dependent on your job profile, they could also be considered as birthright roles itself. So again, it really, there is no right or wrong answer here. It really depends upon what do you want or how do you want to define it for your organization. Another type of roles are application or system roles. So these roles are specific to individual applications or system. They are usually predefined by software vendors, especially since we are in the SaaS ecosystem so much. For example, in a CRM system, roles like CRM user or CRM admin or CRM analyst could exist. These enables fine-grained access control within specific applications, but they are very, very specific application or system focused. You might also come across a role type called as derived roles. I've not seen it used at many places, but some of the places who had good processes defined definitely did. So these derived roles are derived from existing roles by adding or subtracting specific permissions, right? So they inherit the base permission of another role and might have additional permission of constants. So to really simplify it, let's say you have a junior developer role that could have been derived from a developer role but with fewer permissions. So these are useful for creating roles that are slightly varied version of existing roles without starting from scratch. So they give you a good baseline. You can have some sort of relationship between them. So, derived roles could have a field that could tell them as to this is the role that they are derived from, or these might be completely separate roles, whatever you want to do. And that relationship as to would you be able to tell how your derived roles are associated with your original roles, that all comes into the role model. Another role type would be emergency or break glass roles. So these roles are temporary, they grant elevated access and often bypassing standard controls. So they are used in emergencies, right? Like emergency database access. They should be used sparingly, typically requires approval. So tools like, CyberArk or HashiCorp, where we are dealing with privileged accounts or privileged credentials. These dual approvals comes into picture. And after use, there should be an audit to review actions taken under this rule. So ideally, we have an audit trail for every action that is taken in the organization or on a system. But these roles specifically, we should be able to identify what were the actions carried out by these break glass rules, and always have an approval associated with this. Ideally, what I would suggest is you should also have a ServiceNow ticket, right? So if you are using a ticketing system, I've just took an example of ServiceNow. So before you get access to a break glass account, you need to have a ServiceNow ticket created. That ServiceNow ticket would go through an approval process. It might go to your manager or department head or application owner, and then based upon that ticket, you should be granted that birthright access for a specific period of time. And when I talk about time, then there are roles like time-bound roles as well. So any of these roles could be time-bound roles. However, I would strongly suggest against using time-bound roles for business, birthright, or IT. But these roles are granted for a limited period, and after the duration expires, access is automatically revoked. So a contractor might receive a temporary project manager role for a duration of a project. So they're useful for temporary staff projects or situation where access is needed only for a short period. Right? On the same lines, you have to define in your business roles, can it contain direct entitlements? Should it contain a group of IT roles, or what it should contain? So all of those decisions, when you are taking them, have pros and cons to that. There is no right or wrong answer. It should really depend upon what you are aiming for and what is the access structure that you want to create at your organization. But that would constitute your role model. Now, the only thing that I would warn you against here is I don't like nested roles, and I know that many tools out of the box provides nested roles, but as you go deeper into implementing a role-based access control, nested roles are so hard to keep track of and really hard to troubleshoot sometimes. So unless you can absolutely justify that you need access role or nested roles, I would suggest you to not use it. A flat hierarchy is always better. So far we have covered two phases in our role-based access control program, which is assessment phase and then role and role model design phase. That brings us to implementation phase, where we are actually going to create the roles. So for this, you might need a test environment, because these role discovery or role mining or role creation process is a very, very resource intensive process. So you might want to have a test environment or an environment which has got production data, but at the same time do not brings down your production systems. You also need to have a migration strategy, like how would you migrate the roles that you have mined or created or discovered from this test system or role mining system to the actual production systems. And then training, which is the most important aspect of educating your end users and administrators around this new system, this new process, and ensure that everybody understands their role and associated permissions. We will talk about things like role lifecycle management here. How do you create a role? How do you modify a role? How do you delete a role? How do you certify a role? And also, what does role ownership means? What if the owner leaves the company or leaves the department? How do we change the owner then? So things like this needs to be end user or role owners or administrators needs to be made aware of these things depending on how they are going to be interacting with the role universe. So I've mentioned role mining a few times here. So this is the backbone of implementation phase, in which role mining is the process of discovering role based upon existing user permissions. So basically, role mining is a process in which we are creating those new roles. And there are multiple approaches. Three of them that I have used or seen most often is the top-down mining approach, in which you start by defining high-level roles based upon job functions or departments. And then you refine these roles by analyzing actual access patterns and needs. So for a company which is very controlled and organized, a top-down mining approach makes a lot of sense. So think about this. Are the job responsibilities within your organization clearly defined? If yes, then top-down mining approach is the way to go. And if no, do not even attempt it. The second one is bottom-up mining approach. So you must have guessed, these are like analyzing existing permissions and groups, then to form roles. So you are looking at every user, and then what are the roles they have, and you identify some sort of patterns, and then you start defining those patterns into rules. So these are suitable for organizations without clear job definitions or with complex access patterns. Now, I have not seen any organization that could just use a top-down or a bottom-up approach, to be honest, because some departments like finance or fraud or marketing might have very clear roles defined, but some departments like IT might be very different. So for an IT department, a developer might mean different thing for an infrastructure team or a cloud team or an IAM team or a cyber defense team. So use a mix of these top-down or bottom-up approach, which is called an hybrid approach. So combine both top-down and bottom-up methods, and this is often the most effective, especially for large organizations. So how do you actually carry out role mining? First of all, you collect the data. So gather comprehensive data on current user permissions, job titles, responsibilities, HR databases, in some cases maybe access logs or system configurations. Then you carry out the data analysis. In top-down approach, you group users based upon their job functions, identify common access patterns, and then define roles. And in the bottom approach, you use clustering algorithms like k-means, or it could be manual Excel-based analysis, or you could carry out pattern recognition techniques to group users with similar permissions. I would suggest to use a hybrid approach here, so that would give you better roles. And then role refinement. So once you have your basic set of roles created or the crude roles created, you use tools like decision trees to minimize overlaps or conflicts. So aim for roles that are easily understandable and map cleanly to business function. Do not try to solve all access via roles. There would always be some outliers. There would always be some roles that needs to be requested. So do not try to define roles for every possible permission or situation. And then validation. Once roles are defined, you have to validate them with stakeholders, ensure they are aligned with real-world job responsibilities and organizational structure. So in summary, implementing RBAC is a meticulous process, and it demands a clear understanding of organizational needs. That is why, in this case, a business analyst is more important than a developer here. And that business analyst should be a senior BA, because they need to understand the organizational needs. They need to be able to collaborate with stakeholders. They need to be able to continually refine the rules. Ideally, I would suggest somebody who has been in the organization for quite some time is a great person to be leading this effort as a senior BA. Now, role mining by its definition itself is a prime candidate in which we can use machine learning and AI. Surprise. But machine learning could be used here, absolutely. I mean, I have used k-means algorithm multiple times to define those clusters, even for data collection using access logs or user attributes. You could be using or could be doing feature engineering, which is converting raw data into features that algorithms can process. This could include encoding categorical data or formalizing numerical data or creating composite features. It could be based upon access frequencies or timestamp patterns and user interactions, and all can be formulated in the features which could actually be fed into algorithms that could be processed. Clustering. So use unsupervised learning algorithm. K-means or hierarchical clustering are a couple of examples that I have used with pretty successful results in the past. And these actually group users with similar access patterns. And each cluster might suggest a potential role. For instance, if a cluster of users frequently accesses the same set of resources, that might be mapped to a specific role. Now, it is very hard to use this or carry out this analysis using a pen and a paper or an Excel file. And I strongly suggest using a clustering algorithms for messy or large organizations. AI or ML can also help with association rule learning. So algorithms like a priori or ACLED can identify frequent item sets, or in this case, set of permissions that often appear together. And these common sets can suggest foundational permissions for rules. So associated rule learning is a good use case here. We can also have validation and refinements. You can split your data into training and validation set, which is machine learning 101, and you can use that to develop the model, and then the validation set to test and refine it. Although please make sure that any of these ML models should be reviewed and validated by human experts, or when I say human experts, these are like people who understand the business, to ensure that they align with business needs and security policies. Another great use case for AI and ML implementation here is the continuous learning use case. So as users' behavior change and the organizational evolves, continually feeding new data in the ML model to refine and adapt roles over time. Because role is not a once and done type of thing. It is a continual process in which you would have to invest your time and energy and money into making sure that your role model is up to date, is really doing the things that you needed it to do, and adding value, the value that was identified after the first mining activity was carried out. So continuous learning and also anomaly detection, I think, is another use case. So anomaly detection, monitor for deviations from established patterns, prompting reviews or adjustments. Feedback loops is another example. So implement a feedback loop to collect feedback from your administrators and end users on the accuracy and effectiveness of the proposed rules, and use this feedback to modify or update or refine your ML model and improve the role predictions. Now in this phase, the most challenges that I have seen obviously is the stakeholders have to invest a huge chunk of their time. So there has to be an executive level buy-in to carry out this activity. I hate to use the term, but do not boil the ocean is a very apt phrase. Start very small. Data quality. So any manual or automated mining that you carry out really depends upon the accuracy and effectiveness of data. And incomplete or inaccurate data can lead to misleading rules. Complexity is another thing. If you're using an ML based model, it could get very complex very soon, and this would require expertise in both access management and machine learning, which is quite a niche skill set. And interpretability, which is like ML models, especially complex ones, can sometimes act as a black boxes. So it might become very hard for an IAM engineer to understand why are certain rules being suggested. So there are tools out there in the market, very promising tools which enhance and streamline role mining. But successful implementation requires careful planning, continuous refinement, and collaboration between AI experts and access management professionals and business subject matter experts. But there are also benefits of using ML in role mining process. So automated role discovery, scalability, dynamic adaptation, predictive analysis, anomaly detection, some of the things that we spoke about earlier. These are all the benefits that we have. And then you go into another phase after this role discovery and everything that is carried out. You now have your defined roles in which you create your maintenance and business as usual phase. So you define and implement your processes like role lifecycle and governance. So role creation, modification, deletion, role certification, regular audits, all of these things are actually defined and implemented during this phase. Thankfully for role-based access control in the cloud, most cloud providers, like I've seen in AWS or Azure or Google, they have their built-in RBAC systems. So I think in AWS it is user IAM roles which can be assumed by users or AWS services, and permissions are defined in policy documents. For Azure, if I'm not wrong, it is Azure Active Directory and role assignments is used, and for Google Cloud, it uses Cloud IAM with predefined roles and the ability to create custom roles. So the concept is pretty similar across the cloud platforms, but use their out of the box RBAC systems. And then some of the best practices would be regularly review roles and permissions. If you have automated models, that's great, but make sure that as business evolve, so do access requirements, and you are regularly reviewing it. Use logging to track who does what, and cloud has really been a blessing here. So AWS Cloud Trail or Azure Monitors are a couple of services in AWS that I could think of, which really help with these. And then use automated tools like Terraform or CloudFormation to define and deploy roles. Some of the other things that you need to consider is, include RBAC as a part of your IAM strategy, right? So quantify how RBAC enhances your security posture so that you can get the buy-in from your leadership. Define a role matrix, start with really broad roles and refine as needed, which we spoke about when I gave you the example of do not boil the ocean. Education and training is very, very important here. So use this opportunity to teach user about not just RBAC, but also IAM in general. Because roles are at the end of the day an abstract concept. They only exist within the IAM system. Automate as much as you can and stay updated. There is PBAC, there is ABAC, there are so many other things or so many other ways of doing this. Even with PBAC, there is OPA and XAML and so many things. So the devil is in the details there, but stay updated because this space is evolving very quickly, very fast, and I'm very excited to see what is next. Some of the pitfalls that you need to avoid is over complexity. Too many roles can lead to management challenges. So strive for balance between granularity and manageability. So there is no rule of thumb, but try to keep the roles at a minimum and do not try to solve for all cases. Avoid roles that are no longer in use. So stale roles, they can become potential security risk. Another thing which is sometimes glossed over is documentation. Nobody likes to do documentation, neither do I, but always document roles, permissions, and rationale because it aids in audit and future reviews. And not involving stakeholders. You cannot be successful with an RBAC program if you do not have stakeholders not just being there, but also supporting you. So they should be championing this effort as much as you do. So excluding key personnel from the decision-making process can lead to missed requirements or resistance to change. So make sure that they are behind you 100%. Include them as early as possible in the processes. Try to understand and solve for their problems rather than just rubber stamping that we do have an RBAC program in place. And this is where how are you measuring the success of your RBAC program really comes into picture, because I have seen too many firms doing it very badly, or maybe starting on it and not being able to scale it to the level that they want, and then they just continue to use the same legacy roles that they had because it is hard to re-envision that role-based program. So some of the key KPIs that I would suggest, and you would obviously have yours based upon the business drivers that you have, is onboarding time. So identify the time that is taken to grant a new employee or contractor the necessary access. And a well-implemented RBAC should reduce this time. So quantify this onboarding time. And then identify role modification time. So the time it takes to update a role or change user roles, and make sure that shorter time is there because these shorter times indicate more efficient management processes. Compliance matrix. What is your audit pass rate? And track the number and severity of audit findings related to access control, and with the successful implementation, this number should go down. Look at your policy violations. Monitor the number of access policy violations quarter over quarter, and a decrease over time indicates success. Some of the other KPIs are number of unauthorized access incidents, or number of over-provisioned or overprivileged users. Both of them should go down ideally. Operational matrix would be role change request. If you are getting a ton of role change requests, that means roles aren't well defined or organization is changing rapidly. Role approval time, the average time taken to approve or deny role assignment or changes. Then user experience metrics. Carry out that survey. So this might be a very qualitative, but periodically surveying users about their experience and access processes and improvement in satisfaction can indicate RBAC success. You should do it for your IM program as a whole, just because it is very central to how your users operate. So you need to have a feedback management system in place, and this user satisfaction survey for RBAC could be a part of it. Make sure that your users do not have feedback fatigue, but you have very targeted surveys for them to provide their feedback on. Then the help desk tickets. If the access related tickets are going down, that means your RBAC is on the right path. You can also look into role management matrix like number of stale roles or role density. So that means role density is like measure the average number of roles per user. And if this number is too high, then that would mean that role might be too granular. Now you might ask me, how do I identify it's too high? Think of, is it manageable? And if it is not, then it is too high. And also your pattern analysis, or create an overlap analysis of the roles, and that would give you some good indications as well. So what I have done in the past is I have created a system in which I am measuring role 1 to role 2, role 3, role 4, and then role 2 to role 3 and 4. So this loop was running through and identifying the amount of overlap that each role had, and that told me that I have too many similar roles in my organization. You can also have cost matrix in place, like administrative cost of managing and maintaining access controls before and after RBAC implementation. Your call center would be able to tell you the cost of one call, and that would give you a starting point of creating this financial model. And then the training cost. Assess the cost associated with training users and administrators about the RBAC system. So your security awareness and training team might be able to give you some associated data with that. You could also have adoption and usage metrics. You can also have business related metrics like operational downtime. If there is a reduction in downtime due to access related issues, or if business processes have become more efficient due to streamlined access control. Now this is very hard to quantify, but it is a good matrix to have if you can have it. And lastly, it is essential to benchmark these metrics before implementing the RBAC program. Providing a clear baseline to measure against, regularly reviewing and comparing these metrics over time, and giving a comprehensive view of the RBAC's program's success and area of improvement is must, because it's not a one and done thing. You have to carry it out continually, and you need that stakeholder buy-in, and these are the KPIs based upon which you might get continual stakeholder and executive buy-in. Right, so just some things that you could do basically after implementing your RBAC is ongoing review and optimization, monitoring and auditing, continuous training, integrating with other systems, feedback loop, scale and adapt, and things that we have spoken about. So continuous monitoring, refinement, and adaptation are essential to monitoring the system's integrity, ensuring compliance, and meeting the organizational evolving needs. Before we go into another section, plan for the future in terms of budgeting. Ensure that there is budget allocated for the ongoing management and future enhancement of the RBAC system. Because every day that you are not looking at an RBAC system, it is getting stale. Whenever we talk about RBAC, we also talk about PBAC and ABAC, which is policy-based access control and attribute access control. I have some very strong thoughts around both of them, so hopefully we'll pick them up in the later episodes if you folks would like to listen to that. But at a high level, understand this as a rule of thumb that in any modern IAM implementation, RBAC, ABAC, and PBAC often coexist and complement each other. So your company might start with RBAC for its simplicity and then incorporate ABAC or PBAC mechanism, or it could have RBAC for coarse-grained and then PBAC or ABAC for fine-grained access control. So, for example, a user might have access to a resource based upon their role, which is RBAC, but additional attributes like their location or the time of day might further dictate their access level, which would constitute ABAC or PBAC. So, while RBAC focuses on roles as the primary determinant for access, ABAC and PBAC extend and generalize this by considering a broader range of attributes and policies. And choice or combination of these models depends on the specific needs, complexities, and context of the organization. Now for role mining, even if you don't want to create your own machine learning algorithm, there are multiple tools in the market. So most of the identity governance and administration tools do have the role mining capabilities like SailPoint Identity Now or SailPoint Identity IQ, Oracle Identity Governance, even CyberArk has some capabilities, One Identity Manager. I've heard good things about Savient recently. SailPoint has come in with some of the AI capabilities. IBM Security Identity Governance and Intelligence, IGIE, is a good tool. RSA has and Symantec have some of these functionalities. Hitachi and Omada Identity Suites, I think, are pretty good. And I also know of this tool called as Conflexes, and I have spoken to Rahul Jha, who is the owner of this company. So this is a standalone tool for role mining, and they carry out some of the other things as well, which can integrate with your identity governance systems. So I've heard good things about that as well, so you can check it out. Again, not being paid by Conflexes, just something that I've seen in the past companies evaluating. Now, when you're evaluating the role mining tools, what are the things that you need to keep in mind? A, your identity governance tool do not have to be your role mining tool. You might have the best identity governance tool in the market. It could absolutely suck at role mining. So if you need a different tool, you need a different tool. But the things that you need to look out for are the integration capabilities. So ensure that the product can seamlessly integrate with your existing IT infrastructure. It has the capability to integrate with your identity governance system. It has the capability to onboard or get those entitlements in an automated manner. Scalability. The tool should be able to handle the size and complexity of your organization. So during POCs, you might want to do it with 5 entitlements, but you might have 1 million entitlements in your system, and you need to make sure that the tool is able to handle that size. This is a very business focused program, so make sure that the interface and workflows are very intuitive. This is very important. It should allow for customization, and it should have a strong vendor support and an active user community, because you would have things that you would like to learn along the way, and a strong support and active user community helps them out. So you have your KPIs, you have your rule of thumbs for evaluating role mining tools. Carry out a proof of concept, or maybe ask for a trial period. Check out what are the type of roles that is being created. Do not start with the most complex system, which in my experiences have been mainframe systems, super complex to carry out role mining. But do not start with systems that have got like 50 entitlements or 20 entitlements. Start with something which has got a moderate amount of complexity, and then the roles that are created for that system, or start with a department that has got, so do not start with like IT department, that is such a mess. But do not start with like law as well, because that's super clearly defined. So start with a department which is partially messy, and carry out your top down and business and birthright and IT role analysis based upon these. So for your business or birthright, focus on organizations which are partially messy or a little messy, and then for systems which have got moderate complexity and moderate amount of entitlements and user base as well. So you don't want to have role mining on a system that has got just 5 users, because it won't give you that is your role mining tool good enough. So based upon your KPIs and based upon the criteria for evaluating role mining tools, these are some of the things that you can look into. All right, we are at almost 50 minutes. I do have some packing to do because my flight is tomorrow. I will try my best to record a podcast next week, but just in case I get delayed, I will cover up for that in the following weeks. I hope you enjoyed this. Role-based access control is something that I am very, very passionate about, as I am about basically everything identity and access management. So first of all, thank you for listening. I really appreciate the time that you gave me. Please reach out to me via LinkedIn. I absolutely love it. Or you can also email me at theidentitynavigator@gmail.com. So any channel that works for you, I'm always happy to engage and talk to you about this. If you have anything that I did not touch on it, if you have a recommendation for a tool that our listeners can also benefit from, absolutely let me know. So thank you once again. I appreciate you and your time and the feedback for the last episode, which was absolutely awesome. And I was very surprised and humbled. Until next time, this is Rohit, your identity navigator.